Hi, I'm Bill Davis, and on behalf of the entire office hours scene, I get to say welcome to our daily show. This is where we answer your tech questions live every single day, starting at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And let's get right to those questions. Cindy Drozda from Erie, Colorado is our reader today. Cindy, what do we have on tap?
First one is from Douglas Carmichael. When running live graphics via Unreal Engine, do you use the editor to manage the scene or build an executable?
And I am going to go to Jason Bache. Jason, you raised your hand. What's up?
Well, I was running, at least for one of the days at NAB, the Unreal Engine with our Zoom. Who is our Zoom guy?
Andy Carluccio.
Thank you. Andy Carluccio. And we never had the chance to build an executable. But I think unless you want to release it, an executable, that would scare me.
Interesting. Yeah, having watched that process take place, it was amazing. The rig, the crew, the whole endeavor at NAB last year was such an amazing group of people to be around. Literally, people came in from all over the planet to kind of join us for our office hours live from NAB endeavors. And it was one of the most enjoyable things I ever had a chance to do. First of all, just getting to meet so many people. I mean, Jonas came in from Germany, and there are other people coming in from Australia and everywhere. NAB is a great global gathering of people, and to be able to test out that kind of live production was, it's both tense and exhilarating because you never know what you're going to run into. You can think forever about how a live show will go in a very complicated environment like NAB, particularly complicated for wireless, because you can imagine with all those manufacturers and booths and thousands of wireless microphones and video transmission systems and video walls, and the RF environment was incredibly challenging. So I would imagine it would be the same, but live always for live graphics. You're trying to get this combination of being reactive so that if something comes up and you need a graphic in a hurry, you can get it on the screen, but also really well organized. So if you do know you have a run of show and you know what's coming up, that those cues are executable in quick real time when they're needed. So live production is its own beast. It's very exciting, and it was a privilege to be a part of all that. I'm looking forward to it in the future if we can get more of those things to happen. So thank you for the question, Douglas. Good question. Let's go on to our next question.
Next one is from Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. F1 driver technicians use this to switch between things. Do you know what it is? And is it used heavily in media production?
Courtney, did you snag a copy of this thing, whatever it is?
Yes, I did. Let's take a look at what we're looking at here. This is the picture he uploaded. It's kind of blurry, but they have this 12-input switch with these little, it looks like 7-segment LED displays. These are used as comm systems, and Guy did some footwork here and discovered that, it's one of these from Rydell. It's a 1012, I think, 12-input comm switch. So if you need to, they need to talk to, it's this one here, 1012. 12 input with the LED displays on it. So if they're going to talk to different members of their crew, it's basically a push-to-talk for comms, and they have little labels on each of the buttons.
That makes sense, and I would imagine that they probably now, with all the technological sophistication at Formula One, have direct comms with the driver and can talk to that driver all the time, the pit crews, the manager, the team, everybody. Really, whenever you're doing anything in real-time live, communications behind the scenes is probably 50% of the success of the event, because things do change as live is happening. As we know on this show, since we've done it 1,700 plus times, I remember doing a couple of the live gigs for when we were on location, and having somebody in my ear, if I'm temporarily hosting that day, to just tell me we're in trouble, you have to stretch or whatever, really does make the show run so much better. I can't imagine having to do it without that information feed in the back of my head. And I think Formula One drivers and everybody else have gotten used to the same thing. It takes a village. Next question.
Alexander Knight on our panel today in Port Coquitlam, BC. Weird issue yesterday where I lost video on my Roland UVC-02 going into a Mac 4 or M4 Mac Mini being processed by Mimolive. ISO record warning low disk space, and then camera died. Reboot solved it. Sequoia bug or something else? Very odd.
Sounds like it, Alexander. You raised your hand. You want to give more context here?
This is why I don't like new operating systems. But of course, when you buy a new computer and it comes with it and you have no choice and no way to downgrade, that is what it is. So very odd issue here. And I understand that correlation doesn't equal causation necessarily in this case. But I did get that low disk space warning, and then the video died. Now, when I went to look at my UVC-02, the power light was flashing, and it was complaining that it was not receiving enough power, which was really bizarre. Unplugging it and plugging it into a different port didn't help. I changed the cable. That didn't do it. The strange thing is that it was receiving the HDMI signal, and it was locked at 1080p. It was just the USB output that was not working at all. And the only thing that solved it was I had to wait till the show was done, and then I just power cycled the computer, and it came back, and everything was fine. So I don't know who to blame. I don't know if it was a really strange, weird bug with Mimolive. I don't see how a low disk space warning could somehow make a local camera just die like that. Very, very strange.
Craig Kadoki, do you have any thoughts?
Just a quick question. Was it a low disk warning on the Mac, or was a low disk warning coming from the camera?
It was a low disk. I think it was a Mimolive low disk warning, although I still had over 100 gigs left on the SSD that it was recording to. So as soon as I clicked OK on the dialog box warning, it just like poof, my video just disappeared.
Seems to me that 100 gigs isn't that much headroom anymore. Maybe I'm thinking wrong, but what I'm thinking as a video editor, if I'm looking at something and I just have 100 gigs left on a multi-terabyte system, I'm in deep trouble. That usually, it does so much swapping in and out of memory so many different ways that things can get eaten up. And that 100 gigs can actually not be 100 gigs. It could be far less than that. So I would, that's the point where I'm usually saying, what can I back up? What can I clear up? Can I get to the point where I have at least, I don't feel really comfortable unless I have at least 20% of a storage capacity device available as overhead. And I'm much more comfortable if I have 50% of it. Maybe that's just me. And I'm not saying that's what's going on here. But I actually was kind of thinking the same way Craig was in terms of, It was low where? Was it on the main operating system? Was it low on the camera itself? Does it have memory? Is it recording to some sort of onboard flash memory? Or does it have a disk or something else in it? And is that what's running out of room? And you're right, it could just be a bug in the programming. And, I've run into a lot of circumstances where temporary files have eaten up a lot of space, and rebooting will flush those memory buffers, and then suddenly it'll be a lot better than it was before. So keep asking questions. And if you find out the answer, come back and let us all know. Maybe we'll be able to figure out. I don't know very many people who use those Roland UVC-02s, but maybe it's a thing. And then you can help the rest of that community who are facing the problem in the future fix it. Let's go to our next question. Oh, Mickey has a note. Wait a second. I was just told that, bad Mimolive stand in the corner. Yes. Was the UVC-02 accessible in other apps before the reboot? So he's thinking a communications issue between the UVC-02 and the main operating system, I think. And Alexander, you noted for him that you tried opening QuickTime while it was open, but it doesn't work. Mimo steals the video. Yeah. Sounds like you're on the path to something difficult. We're all having our fingers crossed for you. Let's go on to the next question.
Jeff Veely in Henderson is asking, I'd like to add a slider to my secondary camera, 45-degree angle with green screen. How difficult is manipulating the background/motion, and where would one start? Currently, I used a warped image via Media Modifier.
So let me try to parse this out. You've got a slider. You're going to do it at a 45-degree angle. You're not telling me whether that's 45 horizontal or some sort of slope thing, but you want that to change. So the angle of your shot is going to change. You've got a green screen, and you've got a background that you want to, I guess, match to the motion of your slider. There are programs that do this. I don't have a lot of experience with them. Courtney raised his hand just then. Courtney, what do you know?
Yeah, this is not real trivial. You have to have a slider that is set up for motion control. In other words, a motorized slider that has tracking on it, has a optical encoder on it that outputs the position of that slider, and then you got to calibrate your lens to the background, and then you have to use Unreal Engine or something like that to move the background. If that's what you're looking to move, like you want to move the camera and move the background so that it looks like you're married to a real background back there, but you really just got a green screen behind you. You also have to, if it's at 45 degrees from your main front camera, let's say 45 degrees off axis, if that's what you're talking about, then you have to have a green screen that surrounds you seamlessly so that slider can track and keep green screen behind you as it tracks. The other way to do it is to put have tracking software that can track marks on the green screen. And then you have different colored markers on the green screen that will track you. Doing this in real time and outputting it and eliminating the marks on the background can be tricky. You might have to use different, like a lighter green process or something that can be optically tracked by the software to keep your background pasted and looking solid behind you. But it's not trivial, but it can be done. Just have to look for a motion control motorized tracker, or it doesn't have to be motion control necessarily if you're going to use the tracking marks in the background and optically track it.
Yeah, and Mickey weighed in on this one, too. First, he asked whether it was live or through post, and then Jeff came in and said for live streaming, so he wants to do this all in real time. And Mickey noted you'd want to use a camera tracking system with AR or XR system. For post, it's a piece of cake with something like After Effects, but those are two different use cases. And if you're live, it looks like you're going to have to invest a little bit in the system that does the math and then moves the camera. Next question.
Jeremy Murray in St. John, New Brunswick is looking for a budget-friendly MIDI controller for Mimolive or VMix. Any suggestions? Was thinking the Krog Nano series.
Alexander, going with Korg or something else?
Yeah, the Korg is, we're talking about $100 MIDI controller there. So it's it's a very cheap feeling controller. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I wouldn't really recommend that. With Mimolive specifically, because I use it, I'm not a VMix user. I just use the web interface, and it's a fantastic interface because the remote control interface, you just punch in an IP address, and you can rebuild that and reconfigure that and do an incredible amount of work with the web interface. There's also an app for iOS, so you can control it as well. So I've never... Other than that, I mean, you can use a Stream Deck as well if you prefer physical buttons. Programming the Stream Deck with Mimolive, I'm finding is proving to be not as straightforward as I would like it. So far, I'm just using that. I don't know of a MIDI controller that would be good quality other than something like X keys that would give you reasonably professional feeling keys.
And Craig Kadoki wanted to get in on this. Craig?
Yeah, similar to Alex, I haven't used the Korg, but my question is, what is actually budget friendly? I use an X-Touch for faders, which is great, and I use Companion for other buttons, but it really depends on what you want to use it for. The real advantage of going up to something like the X-Touch is that it's motorized faders, so when you're going back and forth between layers or whatnot, your faders are actually showing you what the levels are. I don't know, and I'd like to know if the iOS app, maybe Alexander knows, if it's multi-touch, if you can grab multiple faders at the same time. That would be something I'd like to know.
Courtney Gooden had some thoughts as well. Courtney?
I'll just concur with Craig. I assume you're talking about MIDI controller for controlling audio levels, and the Behringer X-Touch is about a $300 device, so that's pretty affordable and gives you motorized faders for 10 faders? I can't remember how many are on it.
Okay. Nine faders.
9 faders, okay.
There you go. They had to be odd. Jeremy, hope that helped.
8 channels and a master.
8 channels and a master. There you go. So hopefully that'll fit in your use case. Let's go to our next question.
Our next one's from the QR code from Ryan Somerville in Sydney, Australia. Hi, all. Doing some testing using VMix in the cloud with Zoom. Would love to hear your experience of pros and cons of using the built-in Zoom integration versus connecting to another instance and Zoom room. Thanks.
And Ryan, I'm sad to say it doesn't look like we have anybody on the panel raise their hand with particular expertise about this. VMix in the cloud and Zoom, we talk about a lot, but generally on Tuesdays or maybe the Friday show where we talk about more things, IT and a little less practical stuff. Not saying that that's always the case, but today we just didn't have anybody raise a hand on this. Everybody is, I'm just checking to see if anybody in the general group has said anything, and nope. So it looks like we're gonna strike out on giving you some advice today from somebody who has done this themselves specifically. Sorry about that, but bring the question back. Hold on to it. Mickey said, Ryan, want something that is currently reliable? Use Zoom rooms over NDI. That is his suggestion for something that is really solid. And Guy Cochran also said Zoom rooms over NDI has been solid with 6 and under participants. Zoom integration in VMix is being used on Saturday's show. We're limiting it to 8 there. So if you want, maybe take a look on Saturday and call in, because often when their topic is something that you're dealing with, there will be people in the show that day who have a lot of experience with that particular topic. So that's my best suggestion for you. Thank you for your question, and hopefully that helped a little bit. Let's move on to the next question.
Another QR code question from Chad A. in Chicago. What do you recommend for wired headphones or in-ear monitors? Budget friendly, but quality enough to last.
Big question, Chad, and let's see if we can get some answers for you. Harshit Trivedi is going to start off for you.
So the last bit, their quality might suffer here, but the Sony 7506s are a go-to for a lot of people for just good monitoring. $99, you could sometimes get them for $80. The Sennheiser 280s as well are something similar, different sound, a little warmer sound than the 7506s. And then Audio-Technica make I'm missing out on the name, but it's the 50X, I want to say, is the model number. And I've heard good things about those. So their choices between, and these are more than likely all the over-the-ear. There are some decent choices in the in-ear monitors, but it just depends what is budget. Is it under 200, or if it's, keep it under $50-$60. So,
Cindy Rosedale, what's your suggestions?
What I'm using now and what I like is the Linsol KZ-AZ10 in-ear, and these have an ear wire, over-the-ear wire, and today I am using them with a wired connection, but when I do my live shows, I have the Linsol Bluetooth adapter thing that these plug into, and that has proven to work very well and has a long enough battery life for a 5-hour show. And I've had good results with connecting to Bluetooth. So I like those. The sound quality is good enough for me. Some of those in-ear monitors, cheaper ones, I couldn't understand what anyone was saying.
That's not a good thing. Alexander Knight, your suggestions.
For in-ear monitors, what I recommend is you're looking at a single driver one. I'm not a fan of the Linsols. I own various pairs of the KZ10s Pros that everyone recommended. I don't think they sound particularly good. I think they also, for me, they're aesthetically, they're a little bit chunky looking. And I like IEMs that you can't really notice on camera. I'm a big fan of the Westone Audio brand. Now, if you look at me right now, it's very hard to tell that I have anything in my ears. I turn my head sideways, you can see them, and they're clear, and they go all the way in, and the cable, you can't even see the cable. It is unbelievably thin. Now, these ones that I have they're flagship ones, so I wouldn't call them budget friendly. But if you look at the Westone Pro X10, that is their entry level single driver. And right now, Chad, since you're in Chicago, you can get them on BH Photo and Video for $139. So when people ask me for budget friendly, I'm thinking generally under $200. In that price range, you will also find the Shure SE215s. I think the Westones are marginally better. They also have a thinner wire, and they are practically invisible. So either the SE215s from Shure, also the Sennheiser IE100 Pro series, or the Westone Pro X10s are my recommendations.
So you got a lot of good suggestions here. I will say you didn't note whether you're talking about listening to music or listening to speech, maybe monitoring recordings and things like that. I have within reach always, these are two pairs that sit on hooks next to me of 7506s. The reason I still use them after 20 years of monitoring to those, they have a very small presence peak right around where human speech is. So if I'm in the field monitoring live audio and things like that, what is most important for me is to hear whether or not the talent is being correctly articulate and saying things right. If I'm shooting EFP style and I want to make sure I hear any mistakes so that we can reshoot that section of the script or whatever. I would not use them as my music headphones. And if you're more concerned with mixing and monitoring and using them for music, I would go with a different set of things. Two other things to think about if you're going to invest in headphones is there a big aftermarket for parts? I can't tell you the number of ear pads that I've gone through on the 7506s. Traditionally, after about 5 years, whether or not you're in humid or not so humid environments, they flake. The pads flake off a little bit, and you're all of a sudden seeing on your shirts a little bit of black, and so you go out and look for replacement pads. And for the Sonys, because they are so popular, you will find dozens of manufacturers with all kinds of suede, perforated, airflow cushions, all sorts of things. And it's really nice to know that if that happens, or if you make a mistake and your cord breaks, there are tons of aftermarket parts available for them. There's a giant ecosystem because people have been using them for a long time. I'm not suggesting that Sonys are the only headphones that have those benefits. There are plenty of other high-quality headphones. And in fact, let's see, I think I remember Mickey weighing in. Can't go wrong with the 7506's Biodynamic DT770 Pros, Audio-Technica M50X for in-ear monitors, Shure SE215, the Enemonic Research ER2XR, or Whetstone X10s. And he got a couple of hearts listed for that. So there's a lot of possibilities for you depending on the kind of work you do. Our thought is, and our hope is for you that you find exactly the right pair and they last you as long as some of us have had some. I think the pair on the outside of there I've had for close to 20 years now, and they're still going strong. Next question.
Next one is from Francis Fry from the QR code in Cambridge, Massachusetts. How do I remove legacy available cameras from Zoom?
Courtney Gooden, you have a thought?
Well, you didn't say what platform you're on, so I'll let the Apple aficionados that are here on the panel answer about that. If you're on Windows, usually Zoom pulls the number of cameras available to it from the device list, which Windows has. If you go to your device manager in Windows, and you'll see camera up here, and you can just pull that down, and you'll see all the cameras that are currently registered in your operating system, and I believe Zoom uses this to populate its available cameras. So if you have something that's hanging around that's not plugged in, that is unusual, but you can just right-click on it and click Uninstall Device, and that may make it go away. You may have to restart Zoom for that to correctly appear in your choice of cameras. Now, I don't know how to do it on the Macintosh. It has to do with your available USB devices, probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever had to do that because I don't usually have changes to that part of things. And if you are anything like me, things I don't touch every day, I ignore for long periods of time. And I've never had to go in and remove cameras because I had too many choices. Let's just move on.
Typically, it's dynamically adjusted. So if you plug something new in, it will appear in that list without having to restart sooner.
You're absolutely correct about that. And in fact, that was one of the most difficult things. I had somebody explain to me something to do with an exterior monitor, and I went, I don't even see these menus. Why can't I get to where you are? And the answer, it turned out, is that if the computer on boot up doesn't see an external monitor, or if you don't plug one in, those menus are veiled from you, and you don't even see them because you can't do anything with something that's not there. You plug in an external monitor and suddenly those choices are available on the menu where they wouldn't have been before. So that kind of intelligent software design that presents to you only things that are possible to deal with was something I had to learn a little bit. Jason, you had a thought?
I've never seen this on Mac OS, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Perhaps remove zoom or possibly the camera driver might still be in there. If you remove the camera software, that may very well fix it.
And once upon a time, parameter RAM, which is the part of the computer that stores your last settings and things like that. I know there were years when flushing your parameter RAM, there was a particular keyboard combination.
Those years are gone, though.
PR. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm thinking. I remember having to do that once upon a time. It's not so much anymore. All right, let's move into the next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, do you think Bluesky will take over a lot of X users?
Alexander Knight, your thoughts?
No. Right now they have a little over 20 million users, which is pretty good for a new social media service. My concern is that right now they have no monetization strategy. And I've heard that they've got plans to offer some kind of in-app purchase thing where you can get some extra features, but a few months ago, I decided to pay for X, and love it or hate it, I've been a longtime Twitter user, and they have over 600 million users. So X has all the users right now, and that's what I'm sticking with. I really don't want to support a new social media platform unless I know that they have some kind of way for me to actually pay for it, because you know what they say, if you're not paying for it, you are the product.
Yeah, that's absolutely a truism. I'm going to recount a story that happened to me really early in my computing career, back before all these social media sites. But the only thing you had for chatting with people was a thing called CB Simulator. And it was literally a text service where you talked in trucker talk and, this is my handle and so forth. The weirdest thing happened in the first 6 months I was using that service. And I found myself getting drawn into nasty arguments. And I kept thinking, why is this getting so toxic around here? And I suddenly realized, well, it's because if you say something really stupid or really toxic to somebody, you just change your handle, come back in, nobody knows it was you. Nobody had any accountability for anything they said. So I made a decision that has stuck with me through my entire career, and that is that I'm only going to post on anything out on the webs under my own name. Now, I've changed that a little bit. I do have a couple of veiled things just because after the show and everything else, I don't want to expose my persona to the entire world, and there's just too much confusion and too many people trying to sneak into your feeds and stuff like that. But that original lesson of I'm going to take responsibility for what I say on every social media post I say. If I say something stupid, that's on me. It caused me to stop and think a little bit. My texts and my conversations with people got far less toxic. I was not willing to push people as much as I had when I was anonymous, when I was taking responsibility for what I was saying. I do think that my opinion of Twitter has changed. I understand the free speech thing, and I think Elon Musk had every right after he bought it to go in that direction. But I did see a huge coarsening of the discourse there. And I don't know, I'm just a little bit freaked out about how its effect on that many people has continued what I saw back in those early days of CB Simulator. If you say something really outrageous, you just hide the next time you come on and nobody knows who said it. And I don't like that. So I'm still doing that. Most of everything I do online, I do under my own name, and I do that for that specific reason, and it served me really well. Courtney, your thoughts, and then we'll come back to Alexander.
Well, this is, this can be politically motivated, and that depends on a lot of how you feel about the ownership of the movement of Twitter to X. And the thing that will give Bluesky enough inertia to take over a large portion of the X followers is to have all the leaders, people that have 2, 3, 4 million followers, to move and then abandon X. And once they abandon X, I mean, you can have both and look at both. But in order to get Bluesky to take over as the most popular, you're going to have to get the lead influencers to move over and to exclusively use Bluesky. And then once you see that, you might see a lot of the followers move over and abandon their X handles. But it's a lot of it's politically motivated, so it just depends on the people at Blues, whether they can be monetized or not, whether they will last and have a business model that supports them. But, all it takes is one billionaire to say, hey, I'm going to throw some money at Bluesky because I don't like Mr. Musk. And then it'll have enough operating capital to run it for years.
Alexander, your thoughts?
So one of the things that I always hear from people, and this argument doesn't really hold weight for me, but when they say, oh, I get so much more engagement on Bluesky and X is a dumpster fire, and there's so much garbage on there, and I think, well, I don't see any of this. And X has a lot of tools. Twitter had a lot of tools before as well, and I really feel that your experience is only as good as how you curate your feed. So who you follow, who you block. I block so many keywords on that app. So my feed is really, really clean. And when people say Bluesky gets a lot of engagement, now remember, when a service is really young and there's not that many people on it, as far as I'm concerned, yes, you're going to see more engagement because it's new. People are excited about it. Twitter was like that before, 10 plus years ago. And it's kind of quieted down a little bit. But, I think a lot of people are very passive about their experiences. Like, I know for me, I don't really interact with a lot of people. I don't reply to a lot of posts. I don't like them. I don't retweet a lot of posts. But I read my feed in chronological order, and I read every single message. Does it mean I'm responding to people? No. So you're not going to get a lot of engagement from someone like me, but I'm still reading it. So I still see a lot of value in the service there. But again, I think, if you just spend the time using the tools, making sure that you're not following too many people, I think your experience is going to be a lot better. Now, there will be some edge cases. I think if you're a celebrity and you got, tens of millions of people following you and replying to you, well, that might be a little bit different. But I think for the average person, it's a very different experience.
We'll see how it works out over time. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, and on today's panel, Craig has a keynote demo for Omnigraffle users, if anyone wants to see it.
Yes, please, Craig. Please, please, please. Using both of those tools, I am fascinated. What have you got for us?
So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And what I'm showing here is we've got Omnigraffle open, and I did a really simple line drawing.
Shall we say to those people who might not be used to this, because a lot of us use Omnigraffle, I have for many years now, it is a simple drawing and graphics creation program that has a lot of tools. It started out kind of doing org charts for corporations and things like that. So boxes connected to other boxes connected to things. A lot of tools for auto making straight lines and organizational tools, really powerful. So I think that's enough for you to know. And then Craig, dive in.
Yeah, it's a really nice application for doing line drawings. And like Bill said, you can snap all this. So I've made a little monitor here. If I grab the monitor and start moving around the line that I connected to the mixer, follows tracks and everything. So I was putting together a presentation for a potential client. Unfortunately, the job fell through on their end before I even got to show them, but I'd done a nice line drawing for everything. And I'd done this line drawing. I wanted to do something in Keynote to give them, to show them as part of the presentation. So I have found a way to animate this. So if we take, so over here I've got all the lines. You can see they all highlight, and then I've got the groups here are all the cameras, the mixer, and so forth. So, and I've put in a couple registration marks. You don't have to do this to make this work, but you'll see why in a minute. So if I just select all of the hardware and the registration marks, if you go copy as and do it as an SVG, when you go into Keynote, you can paste that and you get everything shows up. If we go back to Omnigraffle and select the lines and the registration marks again, do the same thing, copy as SVG. When we drop them in here, we can then line this up and it snaps to. Unfortunately, there's a couple of downsides to this, but so far we've got that. If we select the level of the lines, and I hope I've kept that, and then we go in and go break apart, it's going to give us a warning that things might change. And then we select that again and ungroup them. Now we've got the individual lines. When we take the individual lines, we can, sorry, I got to move that because Zoom's in the way, add an effect, go line draw, and then suddenly now you can animate all of your cabling.
Wow,
this
in
is done,
5 seconds.
Nicely done.
This is done it backwards.
Done.
So, you know, of course you can go in and change the order, the build order. So the downsides, when you do the break apart and ungroup, the break apart will not keep some elements from Omnigraffle, specifically the text and arrowheads. So that's why I didn't break apart this layer, because then you lose all the text. Of course, that means that I can't remove the registration corners from that layer, but there's other ways to deal with that. You can make the registration marks white in Omnigraffle to hide them, but that's that. This is nice when it's just 5 lines. When you've got scores of lines and you get each element branching out on its own as opposed to them all together, like I could have made that just do the inputs, right? And then so when you do them in groups, I found it to be really quite effective. So
nice tip.
That's
beautiful.
beautiful.
The point of these kind of tools is to make your work simpler. And that's one of the reasons that I started with Omnigraffle probably 10 years ago and have stuck with it ever since. It is a simple program that reveals more and more depth the more you go. And for doing work like this where you want a nice drawing, to be able to knock it out in 2 minutes in the middle of a thought process and not have to worry that if you got it a little wrong, you can't go in and fix it. I mean, this is one of those things where, you know, in the original drawing for Craig, if he'd taken the mixer and dropped it down another inch because he needed something above it or something like that, it's just trivial to change a lot of things in one step once it's created like that. Jason, do you have some
yeah,
comments?
I have to add a tip here first.
Cool.
Craig, that was amazing. I'm going to use that like as of today. That is beautiful. One thing that I always want to follow up with, because SVG in Keynote is so handy. Nounproject.org will give you SVGs for like, you wouldn't believe how many just gorgeous SVGs for, you know, it could be for equipment, but it can also be abstract things. You know, just if you want to be able to visualize a noun, I mean, that's the origin of it. I think it's $60 a year. I showed this to Alex years ago, and he's like, "Oh, I'm never drawing anything ever again." No joke. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, and that you can use without any restriction, license free for $60 a year.
And each one of those elements here, the cameras, the mixer, and the screen, were from Noun. And if you don't want to pay the nominal fee of $60 a year, you can use most of them, I think, or certainly a lot of them, with acknowledgement to the creator.
There you go.
So yeah,
Courtney.
sorry. I was just going to say, the combination here is really powerful, but especially adding in the noun, the three of them are very powerful. Yeah.
Nice. Courtney, you had a comment.
Yeah, question for Craig, because I don't use Omnigraffle, but question is, I know it was originally designed for printing out charts and designs. If you're using it in a keynote, is it possible to invert the colors so that it's not going to blind your audience with white lines and
I believe you can just do that within Keynote, but you can also build it in Omnigraffle as white on black or gray on, whatever. Yeah.
Right. Great. Thanks.
Absolutely.
All right. So more in the Omnigraffle / Keynote toolbox. Let's go on to the next question.
Next one's from Walt Palmer in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. I am getting beat down by YouTube strikes. As a broadcast radio station streaming on YouTube, I don't have control over listener comments that don't match YouTube politics. Suggestions?
Courtney Gooden, do you have any way to help him out?
Well, I'm not a heavy YouTube streamer, but YouTube does have moderation controls over the comments. So you can assign a moderator, and you assign roles to, you assign someone to be a moderator who's logged into YouTube that session, and they have different levels of moderation. They have the ability to ban people that are behaving, trolls that are out there trolling you, and you can assign on a live stream, you can have remove a comment, hide a user, or approve so that your comments don't even appear unless they go to the moderator first and they're approved, and then they get thrown into the stream. So you will have to have some type of live moderation to eliminate the trolls, and you can set a strict, you get one troll in there, you can warn them and not show their response, to warn them that they're violating your comments rules, and if they do that again, you will ban them. So that's one way to do it, but it does require live moderation. So got to hire somebody, put them on the payroll.
Jason Bache.
I'm still trying to get my head around this. When I think of YouTube strikes, I think of copyright violations and the like. I don't think of comments. My first thought is, if you are primarily a broadcast radio station, then broadcast without comments? I mean, is that crazy? So I guess I don't fully understand how a comment is causing a strike.
I guess when you think about it one way, it's kind of, you're now thinking about PR as your listeners go to the YouTube stream. You don't want them running into unmoderated comments, because there's always somebody who thinks that the thing you did is the worst thing on the planet and that civilization will crumble because of it. Alexander Knight, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't heard of this happening from YouTube comments, but I've heard of this. So now it's happening with keywords. So if you say certain words that they consider politically divisive, you can get that can be problematic. So I don't agree with it. I'm not going to get into that, but I don't like what's happening at YouTube with that.
Fair enough. We're going to move on to the next question.
James Haldane in Vancouver. Does anyone have a favorite app for electronic signature with a low monthly fee? I need up to 5 signatures per month.
Harshit Trivedi, have you found something in that class?
I'm going to take the approach of accessibility. So I would just recommend DocuSign is a good company. And again, I'm taking the accessibility route since I use a screen reader. So I find it really useful. Adobe does have the e-signature aspects of it, but it's a little daunting at times, to say the least. And of course, there are other other companies out there providing similar things. But one thing I kind of look at from my personal use case is if it's accessible, because then everybody that you send it off to, no matter who you may hire or may have to have somebody sign an NDA or anything like that in the future, it's a workable application for everybody, a universal design.
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, +1 to DocuSign. And since you're in Canada too, James, it is the personal plan is $13 Canadian a month, and it looks like you can send 5 agreements for signature each month, which looks like that's your quota that you're working with. So that seems reasonable.
Jason Bache.
All right, so this might be a little bit off the path, but it's worth knowing because it's a new thing. Google Workspace is what used to be called G Suite. It was, anytime you pay for Google, it's the corporate version of Google. You can now add e-signatures directly to anything in Google Drive, and it just straight up works. So you open the document in Google Drive or create a new one, click Tools and then e-signature, and then manage signers by selecting the manage signers. You can add up to 10 signers and assign labels to each, meaning if somebody only needs to sign, box 3, 4, and 5. And then you drag and drop the fields into the document, request e-signature, and the whole thing happens through Gmail, and it's completely free for every version of Google for Workspace.
Hopefully that helped, James. Before we move on, let me just remind everybody that officehours.global is the main portal to everything about office hours. If you'd like to get a little more involved in the show, we're in kind of this end of the year. A lot of work is happening on the back end, but when we break out on the other side of the next year's circumstance, I know Alex has a lot of things planned for continual upgrades to what we do here. If you'd like to be a part of all of that, go to officehours.global. That is our main website thing, and you'll find a lot of breadcrumb trails, particularly to be in the Mukana system. That is where a lot of people chat. In fact, many of the questions we're reading now come from that live chat that happens in parallel with the show every day. It also, though, allows you to sign up for indications for email and stuff like that to tell you what's going to be on shows coming up in the future. And it also allows you into the system where you can vote on the individual questions that are asked in the process and therefore help with programming the show. As always, the questions that get the most votes get higher on the list. We get to them quicker and spend more time traditionally getting there. So if you'd like to be more involved and help drive the show, you can do that by signing up at officehours.global. Next question.
Next one is from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. Most of my business comes from white labeling specialized services for larger production companies. I need more of my own clients in 2025. How can I advertise my capabilities when I'm unable to show examples of my best projects due to contracts?
This is a constant thing, and I know Alex has said this for years, and I have had exactly the same experience. You need to tread very, very carefully. When you're brought in on a crew on somebody else's project and you're providing services, I know every one of us who have ever done that have been in circumstances you said, I could have done this better if I just controlled the whole thing and was able to control it from top to bottom. But you're right on the edge of a precipice that's very difficult. And I would suggest you do a little bit of research about this tension between wanting to grow your own business and working for others and making sure that you have really strict boundaries between what is appropriate to do and what is not. And I say that because the most valuable thing you will ever own in any business circumstance is your reputation. And it's really easy to damage. And the first time somebody said he poached my clients and that gets out onto the ecosystem, you will find your phone ringing a whole lot less because everybody is concerned about that kind of business ethics. What you can do is just represent yourself the best way you can. Let people know that you are happy to take referrals for other clients, not the one I'm working with now because that's somebody else brought to me. But if you know somebody who needs a smaller job or something like that and you want to recommend me, that becomes your client. And hopefully you can build them into the next level and continue to add capacity and more professionalism and go up the ladder. It's simply how business works. But I'm going to say, pay attention to that because this tension between wanting to help more people with more stuff and working with people who have brought you into their business is something that needs to be taken great care with. It's my 2 cents. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida is asking, which video input devices do you recommend for use with an iPhone on USB-C? Thanks.
Alexander Knight, he has some thoughts.
Not sure what you're trying to do, Andy, but if you're trying to get a camera of some kind in there, I know that some UVC devices do work. I know they are supported on the iPad. From what I understand, they are not supported on the iPhone. I haven't personally tested this. I do actually own a Roland UVC-02, which is a cool little box, because that will actually take an HDMI input. So you could put a camera, like any kind of professional camera in there, and then that will go out over USB. And it's bus powered as well, and it has audio processing and a mic preamp on it, so you can plug a microphone in it. And plus you get physical controls, so you can turn off and on your camera as well. And it also has transport controls on it as well. So I haven't tested it, but if that's what you're trying to do, it might be worthwhile looking into one of those devices because they are class compliant.
Yeah, those last two words you just said are really high on my radar. I mean, if a device is publicly promoted as being class compliant, it should work with everything that accepts that class of USB-C connection. I've rarely run into things that violate that rule. Sometimes, every once in a while, there is something that is either wholly or sometimes partially class compliant. You hook up this camera to this thing, and most of it sees it, it works, it delivers a signal, but maybe there's no control or something like that you might have with another subsystem that is more class compliant. But generally speaking, those are the words I look for. Craig Kadoki, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to add in one quick thing about when you're talking about class compliant and bus powered. Does that device specifically have the option to externally powered as well? I find bus powered only devices to be a little bit temperamental, because you can't always, depending on what else you're running off that bus, they might not always get the full amount of power they need. So that's just one thing to look at. Another thing with some class compliant USB powered devices is if they are externally powered and it's a USB-C connection, some of them actually can charge your notebook at the same time. So that's two things to look at when you're talking about power.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Plus, there's been an evolution in this. I mean, a powered USB signal once was like, I think 5 volts or something like that. It was pretty, and now there's all sorts of ports that provide power that use all different things, up to some of the ones on the newer devices I'm seeing output up to 100 watts. The equipment on the other side of that, they won't blow up if you plug something that's looking for 5 volts. They're usually intelligent enough and have power supplies that are smart enough to deliver what the device needs. In fact, I'm seeing that more and more with the battery subsystems I'm using. You plug it in and then it negotiates with the system feeding it power and decides how much power its manufacturer allowed it to bring in. And I can plug 3 different devices into some of the batteries that I have now, and they'll charge at 3 different weights depending on whether the source and the device negotiate and allow a higher current delivery. It's getting smarter, but that means it's also getting more complex, and also the backwards compatible stuff. I've found myself throwing away more little old chargers that were stuck on an old standard that haven't kind of renewed themselves to the new standard, just because I don't want to take 6 hours to recharge that device when I can do it in 35 minutes with a newer power supply. Just things to think about. Next question.
Here's one from Douglas Carmichael. What apps do you prefer for building control interfaces for production hardware and software? TouchOSC?
Craig Kadoki, what do you think?
One of the things that I use a lot is Companion. Something to remember about Companion is you can do a lot with it, even if you're not using buttons on a Stream Deck or even the web interface. You can have it trigger based on an HTTP or an OSC input. It can also trigger different devices based on the state of a third device. And a real quick example of that is at work we have the Panasonic PTZ controllers, multi-camera controllers. I have Companion listening to the output. It's always broadcasting what it's doing. So when we select a camera to control on that, it tells our video hub, our Blackmagic video hub, to change the routing for the monitor in front of that station where the controller is to the camera that the controller is now actually using. So it's a really simple way to tell the video hub to track what the controller is doing. That's not something that any of those pieces of gear could do natively. It's only because Companion's always listening to what they're putting out and is doing a trigger based on that.
Hopefully that helped you, Douglas. Next and our last question.
From Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. A follow-up to a question Harold Williams asked last week. How do you respond to potential clients who want you to be responsible for finding advertisers to offset your production costs?
Jason Vaish.
Wow. Okay. So if you're asking me to bring advertisers in to offset my cost, I am no longer your employee. You're no longer my client. We are partners, which means I want to know every single thing. I want to talk about profit sharing, okay, from stem to stern. You just tell me about absolutely everything. I want your whole company's financials. No problem. This looks fantastic. And by then they'll, I think you'll be okay.
I think there's a lot to be said for Jason's comment there. I will say, this is a constant tension, particularly with people who learn you do video production and now want you to somehow help them get their message out to the world, but they have no money to do so. And suddenly, hey, just join with me and we'll both get rich on this. How many times have I heard that over the course of my career? It's hardly ever the case, and it is a difficult thing. But yeah, I mean, big companies have entire sales departments, particularly for this process of prospecting and bringing in the money that's necessary to keep the company going. To ask somebody who has a specialty as a video producer or a web producer or just even an editor or something like that to be also responsible for getting the cash stream flowing into that's a big ask. Now, I'm going to go to the other side of that for a second. If for some reason you have a taste for doing this and you find you can find people who want to do the work, welcome to the fact that you've taken a big leap up. Those people who can both shoot, run a business, and make a profit are in the catbird seat, because that's the hardest part of the whole thing. There are a lot of people who can tell the story. There are not a lot of people who can tell the story and sustain a financial ecosystem that creates enough profit so that you can tell the next story and the next bigger story and the next bigger story. Those are the people we know at the top of the industry who have managed to pull that off. It's not easy. Courtney Gooden, you had some thoughts.
I was just going to say, traditionally, you just say, yeah, sure, if you want me to handle sales, there'll be a sales commission on every ad we bring in. And just add a percentage like 10%, 15% of the amount of the charge to the client for advertising goes in your pocket as a sales commission. And that way you can even hire somebody on commission-only basis to handle that if you don't want to deal with it. Find someone who is a good salesperson, has contacts in the industry, to take that on for commission only. And you can usually find someone out there who does this for a living and will be willing to take that on as a commission-only position.
I will say, having spent a lot of time in my young radio days with the salesmen, because I used to work directly with them. In fact, in the old radio days, they would go out in the streets, right? They would call on businesses. They would eventually find somebody who was willing to do that. They would actually interview the business owner. They would write the ad. They would bring it back in. I was the production director at a radio station where it was my job to take those notes and turn it into a spot of some kind, put it on the air. Those people made more than anybody else in the station. Why? Because their job was the hardest job. Most creatives don't have the same kind of brain wiring that it takes for somebody to be a good quality person. That is a job that is all about building relationships. And if you think it's easy, try doing it yourself. You're going to find out it is one of the toughest jobs. Getting people to sign contracts, to give money to an organization in order to keep them going is one of the toughest things anybody does out there. Courtney, you had another comment?
I was just going to say there's companies out there like Ingle Dodd. This is what our union uses, to place ads in a lot of the publications that we have. We just hire them. They're a marketing company, and they specialize in procuring ads. Sorry about the phone.
That's okay. Sales is not a small part of this puzzle. And if you don't want to do it because you're on the creative side, then be careful about thinking that you can succeed at it. It's hard work. I ended up with a lot of respect for a lot of the salespeople that I worked with. Tough job. Hopefully that helped today. We are at the end of our show. A couple little things. officehours.global/donate. If you're interested in supporting us, we are a 501c3, so we are an official charitable organization, not for profit. And if you'd like to help us get to the next level as we kind of revamp Office Hours going into the next era this coming year, please, we would love for you to do that. So officehours/donate if you feel like helping us out and making sure that we can keep the lights on here and keep going for as long as it's possible. Thank you for paying attention. Our Talk Traversal today, we traveled 28,000 miles. That is 45,000 kilometers, 222 million bananas for scale. We'll see you all tomorrow.
If there's room, Alexander, I'm totally going to put a banana for scale in that teleprompter.
Thank you all for being here.
That was fun.
It was a last minute. Alex will be back tomorrow. I will be back in on Wednesday and Thursday. So it's a choppy schedule this week.
Great job, everybody.
Yeah, it was a good show.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Especially with only 2 questions at the start. This was
I know. You looked a little concerned.
He's scared. We have wonderful producers.
And
I've only ever had a client do that once. That like, you should bring advertisers in, and that was my answer. And it was the fastest like reversal I've ever seen in my whole life.
Yeah. Ideas are easy. Execution of ideas, particularly when there needs to be capital secured.
I got a great idea for an app. I just don't know how to code. It's like, oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
Cool.